So what's good, TMG fam? It's your boy Ellen. I'm back with another reaction. How y'all feel? Welcome back to the channel. Salute. So listen, when it comes to insomnia, let's see, in my relationship, Queen deals with insomnia more than I do, bro. I'm kind of, as soon as my head hit the pillow, I'm gone type of person. Like, I have no problem. But there's been, I probably can count the number of times where I've just been unable to go to sleep. Just, you know, and it's probably because my mind is racing on things I'm thinking about doing or things that I'm trying to figure out. You know, it's your mind not being able to shut off a lot of times for me. But other than that, I can go. But as soon as I get my room to my bed, hit the pillow, I'm done. I'm done. I'm that type of person. But yeah, Queen's more so the insomnia person. But this video here is the top 10 unsettling things people have done due to insomnia. So I'm interested to see what's y'all let me know in the comment section, man. What's some of the craziest things insomnia had you do other than up eating like crazy junk food and food you shouldn't be eating this time of the night or wee hours of the morning? That's probably the main thing that people do with insomnia. Watch TV, knowing they gotta be to work, and like, that's the worst. That's the worst. Now, that's one thing I can say. Catching insomnia before you gotta go to work, let's say you gotta be to work at 6, and you looking at the clock now, you done stayed up, watched the football game, now you well into a series or a show, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. You know you gotta get up at 6, but you just can't go to sleep. Try cutting the TV off, laying in the dark, nothing seems to work. Then you look around and time is just running too. You look around, you blink, it's 4 a.m. Now your body all of a sudden starts to get tired. You sleep, before you know it, it's time for you to get up. So that's probably the craziest thing for me. But we're gonna get into this video. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button, join the fam, make sure you hit that notification bell, and moment of silence for the haters. That's enough. Run the lights up. Let's get to the video.
201 hours. Back in the 50s, radio host Peter Tripp wanted to do something that would test his body and put on a show for all the people around him. He set up a massive goldfish bowl in Times Square.
Did the video already start? Let me back up, my bad, y'all.
Coming in number 10 with Peter Tripp DJing for 201 hours. Back in the 50s, radio host Peter Tripp wanted to do something that would test his body and put on a show for all the people around him. He set up a massive goldfish bowl in Times Square, and from here he would be DJing for 201 hours straight, or at least that was the plan. There wasn't going to be any breaks, no sleep, and this was going to be one of the strangest endurance tests imaginable. Before he was halfway into the challenge, he was already starting to slip. He started to have serious hallucinations and became very combative. He would scream at people walking by, and at one point he started taking off his clothes because he was convinced that spiders were crawling all over his body. Yeah, I think it's safe to say that we definitely need sleep, guys. Coming in at number 8, we have hallucinate. One of the scariest things that can happen to you when you are sleep deprived is you will start to
Wait a minute, did this thing jump from 10 to 8? Did anybody else notice that? Hold on, I'm gonna go back. Yeah, it jumped from 10 to 8.
Definitely need sleep, guys. Coming in at number 8, we have hallucinate. One of the scariest things that can happen to you when you are sleep deprived is you will start to hallucinate. This can both be auditory and visual hallucinations, and this will start after only a few hours of sleep deprivation. So you should be trying to get to bed on time because you have no idea what kind of tricks your brain will try and play on you if you don't get enough sleep. And this isn't rare either. Somewhere around 80% of people who experience sleep deprivation will have some sort of hallucination happen to them. It's because your brain is literally too tired to filter out your imagination from real life. Some people will get what they call a waking dream. This can be a state of dreaming while you're still conscious. When people experience things like this, it can be hard to discern what was actually happening from what was just made up in their head, and this flows right into my next point. Coming in at number 7, we have false memories. People have such bad insomnia that they will sometimes not sleep for days days at a time and can develop what doctors call a false memory. Now, because your brain is in a constant state of exhaustion, then it can be hard for it to properly store your memories. And this could be something small. It could be you remembering a song differently, or where you put your keys, or what happened on the TV show last night. But for someone who hasn't slept for days, they can start to make up memories and understand them as reality. This can be exacerbated by the fact that when people don't get enough sleep, they can start to become extremely paranoid. So they can start to make up whole backstories in their mind about what's going on around them. Sometimes this can cause people to get...
My bad, I apologize. I did not know that all of this could possibly happen. You know what I mean? Like, now, I don't know of anybody personally who has gone days upon days without sleep. But now that I know that, bro, that's scary. Your mind just automatically just start making up stuff, formulating, putting together stuff. Yeah, no. Sound like a bad trip.
Violent, or even become suspicious of all the people close to them. Coming in at number 6, we have the recluse. We have another story about someone who goes by the username Mike48Turner. They wrote about how they used to have terrible insomnia, and it would be normal for them to get only 2 or 3 hours of sleep every night. Eventually, the problem worsened, and they started to go a couple days without sleeping, and even when they did, it wasn't very refreshing. Eventually, they started to develop a serious case of paranoia, and they didn't trust any of the people around them. This made them come to the conclusion that the only way they could stay safe was by working from home. Eventually they stopped going out altogether. He would only order food in, and he would get all of his supplies ordered to the house. Toothpaste, toilet paper. He had everything brought to his door, and he would even go through every last piece of it to make sure none of it was tampered with. This was so bad that he was looking under his fingernails because he thought someone had put a tracking device underneath them. Something changed.
I can't live like that, bro. No. We can't live like that. Like, every day like that, that would drive me up a wall. How do you enjoy life? Like, I want to enjoy life. I can't live like that. No.
And his body just shut down one day. He fell asleep for what was probably 2 days. And when he woke up, it was like someone turned a light on in his brain. That was the first time he could see clearly in months. After that, he went to get help, and he started to take better care of himself to ensure that his sleep cycle wouldn't be disturbed again. Coming in at number 5, we have gambling it all away. A story online talked about a man who spent everything his family had at the casino while he was struggling from insomnia. This person needed a vacation, and they thought what was best was to go to Vegas and try and get some rest and relaxation. But here's the thing, sometimes if you go to a new place, your problems will still follow you. This guy couldn't get a good night's sleep to save his life. Eventually it got so bad that he just started to go down to the casino to try and get his mind off of things. But people suffering from insomnia have a tendency not to care very much about money and start to be very irresponsible with it, and this guy threw away half of his life savings. Coming in at number 4, we have...
Ooh. Half of your life's... You can't come home if you married or got a significant other. You can't go home to them and tell them you just blew away half of y'all savings in Vegas on a whim. On a whim. Total disregard for money. Now, I'm listen, when it comes to gambling, yeah, I have a problem. I'll admit it. You know what I mean? I'll admit it. Not as bad as I used to be, but boy, you know what I mean? But I've never, you know what I mean, threatened my livelihood with, you know what I mean, I always did that with like money I didn't mind losing if I lost. You know what I mean? Even though I wasn't going into anything to lose, but I knew if I lost it, I could still pay a bill. I could still feed myself. I could still take care of myself if something presented itself. You know what I mean? I can pay a doctor bill, whatever. I could do that. So I wasn't never like that, but I've heard stories. So to hear somebody do that, and I don't even know what I'd do at that point.
someone attacking their neighbor. Here's another case of someone losing it from having an extreme case of insomnia. This person was struggling with sleep, and like some of the other people on this list, they would go a day or two without sleeping. This caused their paranoia to creep up to uncontrollable levels, and most of this unhinged energy would get focused right into their neighbor, who would walk their dog around the same time every day. They started to think that their neighbor was spying on them and that they were planning something sinister. So one day they finally snapped. When their neighbor walked past their house, they ran out to confront them. They got into an argument with them, and this turned into a physical altercation. Well, it turns out that this sleep-deprived person's neighbor was actually a skilled martial artist, and they were able to—
I keep telling y'all, be careful who you run up on these days, man. It ain't like the old days back in the days where all y'all just knew how to— you was basing your fighting off of what you learned growing up, going against your brothers or your siblings. You know what I mean? Going against them, that's what you learn. Everybody else had those set. These days, nah, man, you can't just be running up on people these days, man. You're gonna get your feelings hurt.
Well, it turns out that this sleep-deprived person's neighbor was actually a skilled martial artist, and they were able to subdue them until the police arrived. After a thorough inspection, it was discovered that this person needed psychiatric help, and they were administered to a psychiatric hospital for evaluation. Coming in at number 3, we have stuck in bed. Here's another story I pulled from the interweb. It's about a college student who was suffering from a pretty extreme case of insomnia. It started as them being someone who just loved being out during the night, but then it morphed into someone who couldn't sleep at all at night and eventually couldn't sleep for days at a time. Something that can happen to people suffering from insomnia is they will get a very intense case of depression. Your body starts to shut down because you can't get enough sleep to function. This person was now too depressed to get out of bed, but they were battling such a bad case of insomnia that they couldn't sleep. Their bed became a prison. It was taunting them to fall asleep. Just fall asleep and you'll be free from this bed. But they couldn't do it no matter how hard they tried. They would get little bursts of sleep here and there, but only a few hours at a time. Eventually, their family came to visit them and saw what kind of state they were in. Through the help of their family and reducing stress by dropping out of school, they were able to fix their health and get their life back on track. And coming in at the number 1 spot, we have stalking someone. Another story thrown on Reddit, this time by someone who deleted their account, and it follows a very strange story of obsession. This person wrote that they started to lose their mind from lack of sleep. They were convinced that one of the baristas that worked at the coffee shop across the street from them was monitoring them and selling their information. This was a psychosis brought on by several nights without sleep. This got so bad that, ironically, they started to monitor the barista and found out what their work schedule was. They would set up a camera that faced out their window so they could watch the person, and they even would go into the coffee shop and sit there for hours at a time so they could watch this person. Eventually, they started to follow them when they got off work. This led to a Redditor having a mental breakdown in their own apartment and admitting themselves to a hospital. Eventually, they got help and all these strange thoughts disappeared. Coming in number 10, we have combing the history. One of the worst parts of not being able to sleep is that it will increase your paranoia to levels that you didn't know.
They got me again. I didn't know this was a marathon, y'all. They don't even say marathon in the title. They got me again.
Were possible. Like, you know that feeling you get when you think that people are laughing at you when you hear a group of people laugh? Well, what if you had that feeling all the time? Someone who goes by the Reddit handle Belinda12 wrote about a struggle they had with insomnia that made them think that everyone was out to get them all the time, and they had to hide from everyone. They said that insomnia was something that they always struggled with and took medication for, but even when they were medicated, they still had trouble staying asleep, and the little bit of sleep they would get would never feel like it gave them any sort of rest. They started to get this weird feeling that someone was stalking them through social media. Every time they got a friend request that they didn't recognize or someone liked their picture that they didn't know, they would start to feel anxious. Belinda12 eventually started to stay up all night so they could comb through all their history to see who had been looking at their social media. They wanted to find out who this person was. They would stay up late every night looking through every profile, everyone who ever interacted with them on social media. They would only get a couple of hours sleep every other night and then head off to work. The people they worked with could see that their health was getting worse, and eventually someone reached out to find out what was going on. This person helped Belinda12 seek professional help, and they wrote if it wasn't for this coworker, they think they might have gone insane. Next on the list, we have vanishing. The person who wrote this next post never suffered from insomnia, but had a friend who would struggle with it constantly. They always talked about how they could never get enough sleep, sleep, and they always looked haggard. Eventually, they noticed that their friends stopped coming out as much, which made sense, they were always tired. But something else started happening. This person was slowly deleting all of their social media. They would delete photos at first, remove some friends, unfollow some people, and then eventually just started deleting entire pages. Now, this isn't crazy, it's a pretty normal thing for people to get fed up with social media and close everything down. It's not like social media is the be-all end-all, but now there was only one way for this person to reach out to their friend, and one day they just stopped answering their phone. So our writer went to find their friend. They came to their house and no one was there. They looked around the house and all the windows were covered with newspaper. Eventually,
that person needs help. Anytime you show up to somebody's house and they got newspapers all over the windows, like they don't want people looking in, that person needs help. I don't care what type of excuse they give you and tell you that they're fine, they're okay. Nah, they're not. They need your help. See about them.
they found a way to sneak in and there was nothing in the house. Like they just got up and moved without telling anyone and they never saw their friend again. And guys, make sure you hit that like button because it really helps us out. Next on the list, we have messing with their fertility. This is something very scary and true. If you get too sleep deprived, it can stop you from having kids because it messes around with your fertility. I read a report online about a woman who was struggling to have children for almost 2 years. She had 2 miscarriages and she was about to give up on having children. But she went to a health specialist who helped her with her sleep cycle and she was able to fix her issues with her fertility and have children. Next on the list, we have sickness. One thing we don't think about is how good sleep is for your body. Some people will just brush off sleep because they're on the grind all the time and they will reject something that is super important for their health. If you mess around with your sleep too much, it can increase your chances of Alzheimer's, diabetes, cancer, and a ton of other diseases. So it should be no surprise that someone on Reddit wrote about the struggle they had with their health because of insomnia. They said it had started with them just catching a cold every now and again. It would be normal for them to get sick about once a month, but they had a very taxing job and they needed to stay up late into the night to get everything done. This was their life and there wasn't much they could do about it. Eventually, this got worse. They had constant headaches. Every other day their head would start pounding, but they didn't want to stop and rest. They kept pushing through their lack of sleep and increasing sickness and just started medicating the problem. This turned into ulcers and they had such intense stomach pains that they eventually had to leave work. The time off allowed them to rest and so many of their health problems went away. After this, they switched jobs and moved on to something that wouldn't threaten their...
I'm gonna have to tell Queen about that, bro. Because she suffers with headaches a lot, but she does stay awake a lot. I told y'all at the beginning of the video, like dealing with her, she goes so hard with work and different things that she doesn't get enough sleep. She has one of those, what's one of those watches that tell you like how it grades your sleep. So she gets like poor scores on her sleep. So maybe I need to tell her that, bro. More and more sleep. Like this video isn't like really showing you what a lack of sleep can do for you.
Health. The doctor told them if they had pushed much further, they might have given themselves something serious like Crohn's disease. Next on the list, we have starving yourself. This is actually something very common with people who suffer from insomnia. They lose the urge to eat because the body isn't functioning properly. If it gets really bad, you can start to get paranoid to the point where you think that people have been tampering with your food, and this can also be a reason that people will stop eating. I couldn't imagine how scary that would be. For one, I love food, so I wouldn't want anything to come into my life that would stop me from eating and enjoying food. On top of that, how would it feel if you were forcing yourself to eat because you know you're supposed to, but it literally makes you feel sick because you think there's something disgusting inside it? Even though your logical mind is telling you there's nothing wrong with your food, your paranoid mind is telling you the exact opposite. It sounds like a hell that I never want to experience. Right after that, we have overeating. Now, rolling off our last point, you can actually have the exact opposite thing happen to you because you're so sleep deprived that you constantly feel the need to eat. There is an area of your brain known as the basal ganglia, or also called the lizard brain. This is the oldest part of the brain and it is responsible for the most primal parts of your mind. Our fight or flight mechanism comes from this part of the brain. Many emotional connections are triggered in this part of the brain and it can affect your appetite in a big way. When you are sleep deprived, you can have the urge to eat more unhealthy foods, things that are high in sugars, fats, and carbs. Your brain is telling you to eat more of these foods because your body is looking for instant energy because your mind is so tired. So when you're battling insomnia, you can start to see massive weight gain from the lack of sleep and your brain telling you to eat unhealthy food. When people are in a constant battle with insomnia, they can start to feel like they need to eat these unhealthy foods and will start overeating. On top of that, these unhealthy foods will attribute to the person's insomnia and it can become a vicious cycle. After that, guys, we have running away from your family. We have come to this conclusion time and time again. If you get bad insomnia, it can lead to extreme cases of paranoia. In this case, we have a father who was working 3 jobs and trying to provide for his family. There was an insane amount of stress on his shoulders, and this led to him having insomnia and eventually a breakdown. The guy ran away from his whole family and never came back. They never got word of where he went, and he just abandoned his kids and his wife. And finally, guys, we have gave himself a heart attack. Here's something that I shouldn't have to say by now. We're at the end of part 2 of this series, but you need sleep. Unfortunately for people with insomnia, they know this, but they still can't sleep. They are staying up because they just can't fall asleep no matter what they do. And for Reddit user Roscoe Nighthat, they probably had the worst outcome possible. They were working as a bartender at a club that would open up at 9 and stay open till 6 a.m. And then some days they would go straight from their bar job right over to a second gig where they had to translate court documents. Not something you should be doing on no sleep. Well, this was hard to do, and anyone in the restaurant industry will tell you that it's easy to get into drugs, so that's what Roscoe did. They started taking drugs so they could stay up, and this led to some major health issues. Every now and again, they would get chest pains, but they would just push it off and keep moving forward. Well, people should listen to their bodies because eventually this person had a heart attack. They made it through it, but they were only 35 when this happened, and this was a very eye-opening experience for them. Coming in at number 10, we have locked in sleep. We have covered sleep paralysis many times on this channel, so most of you at home will know about the horrors of this ailment. But for those of you who don't know, this is when you fall asleep but you're kind of half awake and you can't move, and then you start to have these waking dreams when some horrible creature will appear and torment you and you can't move the entire time, like I just said. It sounds like hell on earth, but did you know that this can cause insomnia? There are several reports of people developing insomnia because they have such horrendous sleep paralysis. When you think about it, it makes perfect sense. If every time you fall asleep you see monsters, then why would you ever want to sleep again? Personally, I like to avoid contact with any monsters or demons at any point. Coming in at number 9, we have prolonged sleep paralysis. We are rolling off the last point. If you start staying up for extended periods of time, developing some harsh insomnia to deal with your sleep paralysis, then eventually you are going to break and you will need to fall asleep. The body will win eventually and you're going to be sound asleep, or you're just going to be stuck in a waking dream and see demons for way longer than you should. Yeah, that can happen. A Reddit user told a story of how they would fight off sleep because they would constantly be visited by a creature they called the Spire. It had a long pin head and what seemed to be an opening at the center of it that was glowing dark red. They hated seeing the Spire, and they once went 48 hours without sleeping and then crashed super hard. When they finally passed out, they were asleep for 18 hours and it felt like most of that sleep was accompanied by the Spire. It's hard to tell how long you're in sleep paralysis for because they're very similar to dreams in a way. But this guy said that his sleep paralysis was so long that he thought it would never end, and the Spire was speaking to him and was touching him for extended periods of time. Thank God I have zero problems with sleeping. Coming in at number 8, we have seeing.
I second that nomination, man. This is mind-blowing, bro. Mind-blowing. What all things can happen as a result of you not getting, like when they used to say that in school, like, okay, make sure you're getting enough sleep, or your coaches tell you that, make sure you're getting enough sleep. You know what I mean? You took it with a grain of salt. It wasn't really, you didn't stress the importance that much, but this here, this puts it into so much perspective. I gotta show Queen this.
Messages. We have talked about waking dreams in previous parts of this series, but just in case you haven't seen the first 2 and just jumped into number 3, then let me break it down for you. When you get such bad insomnia that you can't sleep, you might start to enter a dream state while you are awake, and you can have trouble discerning what was dream and what was real life. This story was pulled from Dusty MC456, who said once while they were sleep deprived, they were writing down on a piece of paper and they started to see words appear. Words that they didn't remember writing down. The words started to move around on the page, and it seems like someone was trying to send them a message. They tried to comprehend what was happening, but the words were too hard to read because they kept bouncing all over the place. Eventually, they snapped out of it, and when they looked back at the paper, there was nothing there. This is where this ended, but I imagine if it continued, they would have thought they were being transmitted information from a secret individual. Coming in at number 7, we have hallucinations. Reddit user Former Window talked about hallucinations they would get from insomnia. They wrote that they would have both visuals and auditory hallucinations, and after reading the post, I'm not sure which one was scarier. They said it would be common for them to see shadowy figures in the corner of their eye, like a tall person shuffling around or an animal scurrying across the floor. They would quickly turn their head and see nothing there. They also said they would hear singing, like little kids singing, and it would get louder and louder, like the person was closing in. Honestly, the singing kids would scare the hell out of me. That sounds like what happens when Freddy Krueger's closing in. Coming in at number 6, we have answering imaginary questions. Reddit user ColorMePKeen talked about how after they had a baby, they were so stressed out about something going wrong that they couldn't fall asleep. It didn't help that the baby would wake them up.
Now, this is another one that's true too, bro. When we first had our very first kid, bro, and you hear they scare you. All those stories you hear about crib deaths and different things happening and stuff like that, they literally scare you to death. So when by the time you make it home with a brand new infant newborn, you're like, no. And then instead of them sleeping in their rooms, you got them right beside your bed. And then every 5 minutes, you up, you looking, you up, you looking, you up, you looking. You get no sleep in the beginning stages. You know what I mean? So I totally understand this one.
Up in the middle of the night, so any chance they would have of falling asleep would be disturbed anyway. Well, this got so bad that they didn't sleep for 3 days, and they started to answer questions out loud that they were hearing in their own head. Coming in at number 5, we have ripped their house apart. A story pulled from Reddit follows a man's descent into paranoia from insomnia. He could never sleep and started to think that his house was bugged. This paranoia fed into his insomnia, and things compounded until he was only able to sleep for a couple hours every night. Eventually, he couldn't take it anymore and started to go through every inch of his house to try and find some sort of monitoring device. And this wasn't just looking under the table or behind the TV. This was a full demolition job. They started to rip up the floorboards. They were ripping out the drywall. They were going through the electrical, pulling out plumbing, taking apart electronics, cutting open the furniture. And this person even started to dig up their backyard because they thought they could find some sort of secret wiring that was leading to their home. One of the wildest parts about this whole thing was that this person didn't even have any sort of experience in home wiring, plumbing, or any of those things. It was a miracle that they didn't accidentally electrocute themselves. Well, in the end they found nothing, but they were still in a harsh state of paranoia. They had nowhere to turn and just sat in their destroyed home. It wasn't until their sister came to visit and saw them in this state that they were able to get help. Coming in at number 4, we have lived in their car. As you can probably tell by now, insomnia can lead to pretty extreme sleep deprivation, which can lead to paranoia, which can lead to hallucinations that you will start to believe. Another case of horrible insomnia follows someone who was too afraid to sleep because they were convinced that there was a demon in their home. They thought that if they fell asleep for too long, the demon would take control of their soul. Imagine being possessed in your sleep and then you wake up on a Monday and you gotta go to work. What a horrible way to start your week. Well, eventually that lack of sleep fed into their fear of demonic possession, and there was only one thing left to do, and that was live in your car. This person packed what they could fit into their car and then drove off. They lived in their car for 6 months while they tried to find a new place to live that was demon free. Of course, living in your car isn't great for your sleep, so the insomnia persisted until they actually had a fresh bed.
See, I was talking about sleep. Look at me yawning. I'm getting sleepy now. Like, you see, I have no issues with sleep, bro. At all. No issues. Just the mere thought and talk about it got me yawning.
To sleep in. But who knows, maybe this one was justified and there was a demon in their home. Next on the list we have the commanding voice. Reddit user Free as a Nerd talked about how their insomnia got so bad they started to hear a voice in their head. It would come and go, but the longer they didn't sleep, the louder and clearer the voice became. During an exceptionally bad bout with insomnia, they stayed up for 4 days. Man, I really have no idea what that would be like. Once it hits 12:30, I'm ready to tuck in in and pass out. I don't care if the party is just starting. Well, a Reddit user was now hearing the voice in their head, and it was so loud they had no choice but to listen. The voice told them to look in the mirror, which they did, and while staring at themselves in the mirror, the voice told them to start pulling out their hair. The voice said that if they did this, they would finally be able to fall asleep, so they gave in and started pulling out their hair. Now, they didn't pull it out to the point where they went bald, but they did make their head a little bit patchy, and of course, this didn't help them fall asleep. Coming in at number 2, we have got obsessed with conspiracy theories. This one was posted to Reddit by Reddit user Riz34Zill. They said that they always been a skeptical person and were constantly looking up conspiracy theories. I think a lot of us out there are guilty of delving a little too deep into conspiracy theories, but this Reddit user said it became an obsession, and this is where their insomnia started. They would get home from work and then go right to the computer and start looking up YouTube videos about certain conspiracy theories. They would stay up all night watching video after video about flat earth, about the Illuminati, Area 51. It didn't matter how far the topic was. Eventually, it got so bad they couldn't fall asleep. They would feel anxious if they didn't go do their nightly research. If they didn't spend hours every night digging up some of the most bizarre corners of the internet, they would feel as if they were falling behind and that the powers that be were getting a leg up on them. This newfound insomnia was now feeding into this nightly routine, and right when it seemed like it was going to be his life forever, he snapped out of it. He watched a series of videos that just seemed too extreme, and he started to question all the things he'd been looking up. He took a step back and realized that he needed to stop, and he felt his anxiety melt away, and he was able to get back to a regular sleep routine. And coming at the number 1 spot, we have camped out in the woods. This is another case of someone worried that they were being watched. I pulled this one off of a mental health help forum, and this person talked about how they struggled with paranoia their whole life. They took medication to deal with their constant fear that they were being monitored. Eventually, they started to feel better, so they went off their medication, and this is where the downward spiral started. It started with them not wanting to be around screens, so they got rid of their phone and their laptop. They were afraid of cameras, so they refused to go to any store that had a CCTV system. After this, they started to think that there could be someone or some sort of robotic device in their home that was watching them all the time. Now they couldn't sleep, and this insomnia only made the problem worse. They decided to fill a backpack full of goods and run off into the woods. They spent 2 weeks living out in the woods before someone found them. A hiker was coming through and saw this makeshift campsite and decided to talk to him for a little bit. After speaking to him, he realized that he was not well, and the hiker helped him get back to the city and visit a mental health center to get his medication and his life back on track.
Bro, I didn't know, y'all. And like I said, I'm oblivious because I don't have problems sleeping. So there's no way I could have known. You know what I'm saying? There's no way I could have known. But this right here put a lot of things into perspective, and it may help Queen out because, like I said, she's the main one that has issues in our household with sleeping, and that could help out with some of the things she may suffer with, headaches, different things. You know what I mean? So I take this very, very seriously, as you should if you're dealing with insomnia. So hopefully this helps you out. Maybe, you know what I mean, somebody can drop in the comment section what's some things that helps you when you deal with insomnia to get you to sleep, and people can benefit from it. You know what I mean? So y'all get at me in the comment section, man. Let me know what you think, and stick around and stay tuned, bro. Till the next reaction, I'm gone. Peace.